Clean Tech Hub Nigeria, Ifeoma Malo.
Thank you very much. I understand we have 7 minutes, but I might need less because the earlier speakers have done a great job and have said almost everything, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. Allow me stand on all existing protocols. I want to thank the organizers of this event for putting it together and placing issues around climate change front and center in the way that we're planning our energy transition. I think it's such an important topic because we are seeing a lot of the geopolitics playing out around this topic. Now, listening to the prior speakers, we have a great idea, we have a good idea about how the world is shifting. There is a global shift that has been occurring the past 5 to 6 years when it comes to our concept of energy and its usage and what it means for development. We see that shift in the conversations that are happening, not just in terms of climate change, but also in the case of how we're speaking about development. Why this is important is because it has significant impact on where every other country's economy is going, especially for countries in sub-Saharan Africa who have not reached the standard of development that we have in Western countries. There is also that shift occurring in the country, in Nigeria. When I came into the energy sector, I came into the electricity sector. So I was doing a lot of work on on-grid technology at the time. But in that time, I think if anybody had told us between 2013 and 2014 that there was going to be this huge push around renewable energy as a source of energy in Nigeria, I think we would have laughed at the person because at the time we were right in the thick of selling off our power assets, decentralizing power, and giving the discos and gencos enough ammunition to get up and run. So it was not that it was not in our line of sight, but it was not a priority either for government or even the private sector. But what has happened in the past 5 or 6 years, there has been that shift such that you're now seeing even the discos beginning to talk about doing renewable energy as part of their energy distribution strategy. And even the gencos, you're seeing a lot of MOUs and agreements that are being signed to make sure that renewable energy is part of their generation production. And in the oil and gas sector, they are not left behind. We see that trend too in the industry, where we're seeing a lot of oil and gas companies begin to set up either SPVs or set up a unit within their company that is dealing with renewable energy. So whether you're looking at it from the global level, the national level, or the industry level, something has shifted. And that shift is going to only accelerate as time goes on. So what does that mean for Africa, and most especially, what does that mean for Nigeria? That's the question we should be asking. The transition politics is still a genuine debate. It is genuine because, a lot of the conversations that are happening around transitioning away from fossil fuel is good in theory, but when it comes to how practicable it would be, especially for countries like ours, there is a question about whether it can be implemented at the rate and at the time that a lot of the Western powers who control the basis for this shift want it to happen. Can we do it as fast as they do want it to happen? Many African politicians and professionals are still skeptical about transitioning from fossil fuel, and that's fair. It's a fair conversation, it's a fair debate that we can have. But we can nonetheless agree to take advantage of the increasing global funding for energy transition and use it to make use of natural gas as a transitional alternative, which is what the federal government is doing. When they declared the decade of gas, I think they had already put their line of sight that gas would be our own transition mechanism, and it's a fair policy to take. Especially when you think of it in the line of the conversations going around hydrogen, right? The question we've been asking is, how different is this from gas? But if countries in the West are shifting to hydrogen, why should we not use our gas resources as part of our transition mechanism? That's a question. Either way, we'll have to figure out an answer. There's also the urgent need to embrace proportionate responsibility on other countries that are not Africa, China, EU, and US. These countries emit 40% of the greenhouse gases, not us. So while all of Africa emits just 7%, a lot of the prioritization around renewables and imposing higher emission reductions are always talked about in terms of sub-Saharan Africa. We're electrifying villages, we're electrifying communities. That is true. This is why we're advocating that there has to be a hybrid approach. For instance, one of the things that my organization continues to say is when we're talking about renewable energy, we can use it to electrify the underserved and the unserved. We can use it to electrify peri-urban and rural communities, communities that do not have light at all. This is why you're seeing a rise in the proportion of mini-grid companies in Nigeria. When you talk about solar, the biggest amount of funding that is coming into Nigeria is for the mini-grid sector, solar mini-grid sector. We've gone from having, I think, about 12 or 13 major mini-grid companies to now having over 80 of them. And this is a good thing because we're now having our engineers, our technicians, and even non-technical staff getting employment in the mini-grid space. However, one of the things we also have to remember is that as we're electrifying communities, especially those that have never had electricity, we must teach them how to use it. This is where we talk about productive use of energy. The fact that sometimes when those mini-grids are sited in rural and deep rural communities, the only thing they're used for is to put on lights. People need to know how to generate economic activities using electricity. So how do we do that? Some of us have started street business schools, where when we go into those communities with mini-grid companies, we're teaching the local artisans how to use those mini-grids to start micro and small businesses. And also how to keep accounts of their businesses, whether it's what a balance book looks like, whether they understand what a revenue and turnover looks like, we'll have to teach them also in their local languages. And this is how you get citizens who can then pay for the electricity that they use. It is important to emphasize that even when we talk about renewable energy and climate-smart technologies, that these things are not free. There is nowhere where electricity is free. It is one of the most expensive things, commodity that you can have in a country, a most expensive service you can have in a country. So it is not free. And so we must also get people to get used to paying for electricity. It is very important, especially if we're to build a sustainable electricity system using renewable energy. I will make 2 more points and then call it a day because I think, like I said, the former speakers have done a lot. One of the things we also need to begin to look at and also encourage our government to do is to look at the local content. I like the fact that there's a lot of policies and regulations. I think the electricity regulator has done a fairly good job. I will give them a lot of credit for the work that they've done, especially for some of the regulations that they brought out. But we cannot build a sustainable transition when all of the equipments we use are imported. It is not a way to build an economy. The more that we continue to import solar panels and batteries, lithium-ion batteries, we are not building a sustainable economy. We're just enriching someone else's economy. So until we get into the mindset of putting in financing for assembly and manufacturing in Nigeria, then it's not sustainable development because it's not sustaining, not the local community and not the wider Nigerian community. It is a problem for us because when we tell donor agencies or donor finance institutions to put in assembly plants or to put in money, they refuse. The question is, why are they refusing? So this is the challenge that we have, and I'm hoping that the NAEE will take it up, is to get our local investors and local banks to begin to invest in the renewable energy sector. It is the most important investment they can make today. And this is because we're already seeing a lot of the investment flows that are coming in being guaranteed by second and third nations. And so that financing, so people, let me break it down like this. A mini-grid company in Nigeria is taking out a loan from a foreign company, or from a foreign bank, and is supposed to pay them back in dollar or euro. All we're doing is setting them up for failure, which happens down the line. Now, the ones that are able to, because they're going to pay back, they get the money, they change it to Naira, they do the projects, then they have to change the profit back to dollar. And with the way the dollar is fluctuating, it doesn't make sense. So what we have, even though we have 80 now, is a lot of them are still struggling. We need local banks and local financiers and local investors to come and, backstop some of that financing for our own local indigenous renewable energy companies. This is also important because we're also seeing that in terms of investments and investor flow, and in terms of the renewable energy companies that are coming in, we see, and this, I say this carefully, I know this is being televised, we like foreign investment in Nigeria, we just want a piece of the cake for our own engineers and our own local manufacturers. That's not a bad thing to ask. But our own people are being crowded out of the space already. So if you count, in 2016 or 2017, if you counted the 4 or 5 big mini-grid companies, they were all Nigerians, mainly Nigerians. If you asked today, I can tell you that about the top 5 or 6 are not Nigerian companies. So that shift is also occurring. They see this market, they think the market is lucrative, they're coming in, they're not coming in to do CSR. This is an investment for them. So if they're making money, it's good that they're doing it and they're employing our people, but let our own indigenous companies also survive the market. I will stop there because there's a lot more to say, but I don't know if people have questions that we'll be happy to answer.